is we have a guest called Refuting Orientalists, who goes by the name of Mohammed. You're very welcome to the channel.
Thanks.
Our guest's name is Mohammed, and I see there's plenty of people in the house, so welcome everyone. We're going to have a cordial discussion. We obviously have very different opinions. The topic under discussion today is, are Islamic records historical? And we're looking at the Sirah and the Hadiths. And so the way we're going to run this, we're not going to be worried too much about time specifically. Mohammed here will give an argument. I'll cross-examine him, and he'll share a few slides with that as well. And then I'll give some counter arguments, and we'll see how it goes. We'll go back and forth. We have PowerPoints, so it'll be easier for everyone to follow. Now, I will try my best to keep track of the chat, but I'm going to be mostly focused on the topic in hand. So if I don't see your comments, it's not for any other reason that I'm just engrossed in what's happening. I see there's people from all over the world here. I see Paul Besa from the Philippines, and I'm sure there are people from all over Europe and America and Canada and all sorts of places. Without further ado, I suppose just to get started, we'll just specify, we had this discussion online and through email that the topic is going to be reliability of Islamic historical records, and we narrowed it down to Hadiths and Sirah, and we're both happy with that. We're going to be obviously looking at claims, but in terms of evidence, both positive and negative, and we're both in agreement. We want a fruitful discussion, so we're going to keep it civil, cordial, and would you like to start, Mohammed?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Bismillah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll start. Bismillah. So in today's debate, we are basically discussing, like you said, reliability of Sirah and Hadith. We are not going to talk about Quran today, mostly or at all. And basically, before we go into the topics, right? Just a little bit about burden of proof I would like to add. I'll just...
Yeah.
It's not switching.
Do you want me to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
So, the claim that hadiths are reliable or preserved is a claim. The claim that hadiths are not preserved or fabricated is a claim. Both claims require evidence, and if we are ignoring evidence for claims, right, then we are just going by blind faith. And in that case, what's the point of debating or discussing this topic?
Yeah. Just before you go on from that, I noticed that you have, if I can go back to the first slide for a second, a couple of things. First of all, you're focusing on preservation when really the topic is reliability. Just be conscious of that, because I could have a forgery that could be perfectly preserved, but that doesn't really lead us to it to be historically reliable. The other thing is you're focusing on Sunni hadith, which is you're perfectly entitled to, but hadiths include Shia and Sunni, and obviously I'm not going to be getting involved in the disagreement between Sunnis and Shias on hadiths, but I just want to point that out, that actually there are contradictory hadiths which look equally of the same value in the Shia tradition. Any thoughts on that before we go on further? I'll give you back your slide actually as well.
Firstly, with regards to preservation, yeah, I agree that even a forgery can be preserved. So what I mean by hadith preservation is these narrations go back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or not.
Okay.
What's being discussed. As far as Shia hadith, actually later on I will bring that up as an argument for Sunni hadith, but not right now.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. All right.
Should I move to my first argument?
You can, yes. Are you able to move the slides, or do you want me to move it for you?
Yeah.
There we
You
go.
move.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you move it this time?
No, it was you.
Okay, sure.
All right.
So I'll start my first argument for Hadith preservation, right?
Okay.
Basically, stylometry is it's a type of linguistic analysis. Nowadays, it's done using computers. It's called computational linguistics as well. There are numerous stylometric studies done on the sayings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Sahih Bukhari. These studies show that those sayings, the words of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have one author. Now, this is an evidence for hadith preservation, pretty powerful one, and I'll just explain why. Firstly, every single hadith that is mentioned in Bukhari is narrated elsewhere as well. A lot of the times in works earlier than Imam Bukhari. A lot of these are in Muwatta Malik, which was before Imam Bukhari was even born. So Imam Bukhari did not make these up. These are narrated in different times and places by numerous people. If they were all making these up, these wouldn't have one author. If these were coming from multiple sources, these wouldn't have one author. The only way these can have one author is if the narrators are honest and the narrations go back to one person. The only common source in all those narrations is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hence, these narrations go back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Can, can I respond just to that before? I don't want to interrupt your argument. Is it okay to respond to?
One point. Just let me finish one point.
Okay, fine.
What I'm showing here on the screen right now, this is the study by this scholar. I've even linked it, and there are numerous studies like this. So this is the reference. You can respond.
All right. Okay. Let me just go back to the previous slide, just so respond because you. Oops. There was that one. Okay. So so your argument is that because the style in Al-Bukhari is the same, it has one author, and so therefore that leads us to think that they're reliable. Am I understanding you correctly?
Not just that. Like the stylometric study only shows there is one author.
Okay.
I think you use an inference or other arguments to show that author is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I just want to, here's the thing. If let's say Al-Bukhari, and obviously this is a claim, we don't know for certain if Al-Bukhari actually wrote down these hadiths, but let's just assume for argument that he did actually write them down at the time that he said it. He would be the one author, and that would explain the fact that there is one style. Now, if he was using earlier traditions with different hadiths, that would mean that he would be replicating the stories that lots of different people from different times have passed down the line through the tradition. People remember things differently and have a different style of telling a story. Even if they're recounting something that just happened 5 minutes ago, everyone has a different way of saying things. So what I would expect, actually, rather than the style being the same, if this was genuinely from a tradition with different hadiths from different peoples at different times, I'd actually not be expecting it to be stylistically the same. I'd be expecting lots of different styles, particularly in the stories. So actually, just from this argument here that it has one style, that actually for me has the opposite effect. It doesn't actually lead me to be confident that this isn't a forgery. It actually, now I don't actually think that he necessarily made all these hadiths up, just so we're clear, but the fact that the hadiths don't appear to have different styles is kind of worrisome, because it probably means that he has edited them into a similar style, which would lead me to have less confidence in the value of those hadiths. Do you want to respond to that before we go further? Yeah, thank you.
Firstly, as far as these going back to Imam Bukhari or not, right? Again, Orientalists or Western scholars generally try to do that, but what's generally accepted and what's very hard to deny, right, that is basically things like Musnad Ahmad or Musannaf Abdul Razak or late second or early third century works. Challenging these is really difficult. Secondly, these cannot possibly be the words of Imam Bukhari. Why? These hadiths, in the same words that they are in Sahih Bukhari, are in exact same words located in earlier books like Muwatta Malik, Musnad Ahmad, Musannaf Abdul Razak. For Muwatta Malik, Imam Bukhari was not born till after Imam Malik died. So unless Imam Bukhari was time traveling, these cannot be the words of Imam Bukhari. Secondly, what I mean by style is one style of authorship, one linguistic style. In fact, this is how stylometry works to identify authors. So if the stylometric study is identifying one author, then this doesn't show there are multiple authors. I mean, that point just doesn't make sense. Thirdly, all those people could not have made up the same exact style. And if it is your argument there that they could or did make up the same exact style,
No, that sorry, just to be clear, um, if the hypothesis is that Al-Bukhari wrote it down, then that would make perfect sense. It's the same style throughout. It doesn't really tell us much. Now, in terms of those earlier Hadith collections, do we have those originals?
Firstly, just to address the point about Imam Bukhari writing it down, again, these hadiths in their exact wording are present in works before Imam Bukhari was even born. So
Yeah,
the
do we? Yeah. So
yeah,
sorry.
I will get to that. I will get to that.
Okay. Thank you.
The claim that Imam Bukhari somehow made these up does not make sense. Now, as far as do we have those sources or not, we have Muwatta Malik. In fact, there is a page actually from the time Imam Malik was born, like when he was alive. We have a fragment of Muwatta Malik from the time period, just a page.
But so we just have a fragment, essentially.
We have the entire book, actually. I was just talking about exact manuscript for the time period. We have Muwatta Malik preserved. We have Musnad Ahmad preserved. We have Musannaf Abdul Razak preserved. So these books, like, we have them as they were.
So obviously all of those things will need to be fact checked. Now, do you have any of these in your slides? Because obviously this would be the most important piece of evidence you could provide us, is actually maybe perhaps like a scholar that has dated the manuscripts and maybe pictures of these manuscripts. Do we have anything like that to offer today?
Well, these are sources that are accepted by both Muslims and non-Muslim scholarship. Things like Muwatta Malik, things like Musannaf Abdul Razak, things like Musnad Ahmad. So this is like generally accepted all the way through.
Unfortunately, like, if we're going to deal with evidence, we do need to bring the evidence to the table. So I would, in order to accept your claim, I would need to see the evidence of these manuscripts and to see that these hadiths were there and that they are really from the time period. So, but that's fine. We'll carry on with your argument.
Firstly, if you or I or a third party comes up with a random criteria, right, that criteria needs to just be justified. This is something regarding the sources I'm mentioning, something both Muslims and non-Muslims accept. Scholars, not laymen, scholars in this regard accept. So those sources, like, there is simply no way around this. I'm not talking about the first century, like Sahif of Hammam bin Munabbih. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things that are generally accepted, like the Muwatta of Imam Malik, Musannaf Abdul Razak. Have you heard of Harold Mutsky? He did an entire study. We might go to that later as well. So
can I ask you to just to speak a little bit slower, because I'm struggling to hear what you're saying. Sorry, could you repeat that just a little bit slower so I can hear what you've said?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll repeat this last part, then you can respond, and then we'll do your argument or my second argument.
Oh, okay.
As far as sources are concerned, again, the three sources I mentioned, Muwatta Malik, Musannaf ibn Abdul Razak, Musnad Ahmad, these are sources that are accepted by both Muslims and non-Muslims. And if you just want one reference for their reliability, actually I'll give two. I'll give one for Musannaf ibn Abdul Razak off the top of my head and Muwatta Malik. If you look at Yasin Dutton's book, he's a Western Orientalist scholar. He gives multiple arguments for these books being reliable, because we have...
Who does, sorry?
Yasin Dutton.
Can't make out what that name is.
Yasin space Dutton. He's a Western scholar, I think an English scholar. In his book on origins of Islamic law, he gives multiple arguments for reliability of Muwatta Malik and these books. One of them being that these are in different locations, different times, and different places, and being quoted by numerous scholars, and the wording is essentially the same. So the argument against their reliability does not work. As for Musannaf ibn Abdul Razak, basically Harold Mutsky, who's a major Orientalist scholar, he did source criticism, analyzing basically the isnads of all of these. And his argument, which I can later go into if you like, was basically that these wouldn't be made up. Like if you are fabricating, you would pick higher authorities. You wouldn't. You would, if you are fabricating, you would have perfect isnads all the way through. You wouldn't report mursal isnads and authentic isnads. Like there are numerous arguments. Basically, Muslims are not Muslims.
The isnad argument doesn't work with me because that's another claim. It's not evidence. You know, if someone is at the end of the chain and says, "Well, actually, you got it from this fellow, who got it from this fellow, who got it from this fellow," and none of that is backed up with any evidence, I can't take that as historical evidence, and no scholar would. That's serious. It's not something that you can verify. All you have is someone at the end of the chain saying, "Well, there's a chain of people going back in time." That can't be accepted as historically reliable. It's just a claim at the end of a supposed chain.
Firstly, isnads are historical sources. I would have to argue for them to be reliable, and you would have to argue for them to be unreliable. But the reason this particular point is being accepted is because these isnads, the way that they are, would not have been made up. This is an argument from the criterion of dissimilarity, and this is something that Motsky does again and again, because this is not something I'm saying, it's a non-Muslim scholar saying, and the reason he's saying is the isnads as they are, they wouldn't have been simply made up. Because let me give you one example, right? And this is one of his numerous arguments, and I'll just give it, right?
Okay.
So basically, in Musannaf ibn Abdul Razak, right, we have authentic isnads, complete isnads. Side by side, we have mursal isnads or incomplete isnads, and a lot of them. If these were being fabricated, right, at any step of the way, why would anyone fabricate mursal isnads? And moreover, why would anyone fabricate the majority of the isnads to be incomplete?
That's why would it, to make it look, if you're going to do a forgery, you're obviously going to create more obvious forgeries to kind of go, okay, well, that's obviously a forgery, but my forgery, well, you're not going to call your own thing a forgery. My one is authentic, but that's clearly a forgery. So that's just misdirection.
This is the same book. These are not different books. These are the same book, the same source, right? Let me give you one example. If I am supposedly taking an exam, right, and I'm cheating from someone, I think that's appropriate in this regard. And if the teacher knows I'm not very intelligent in this regard, if I give every single answer correct and it is identical as the other person's, right, then I would be caught. So I would give one or two, a few answers that are incorrect or different from the other person's. But that's not the case we have here. We have not just one or two isnads that are mursal. There are numerous of them that are mursal or incomplete. A fabricator would not do it. Moreover, this pattern would not repeat again and again. So again,
well, the fact that you find the argument compelling actually would strengthen the idea that it was a forger would do that for the very reasons you're given. So I don't find that compelling. Maybe you do, but I suppose there's a certain element of faith to this.
Point, right? Just to respond to this point.
Yeah.
If I find something compelling and that's evidence for it being unreliable or forged, right, you can apply to literally anything that people find compelling. So I don't think this argument works. You can have the last word on this, but after that, if you want to go into one of your arguments, we can do that. Or if you want to
okay, have you finished your stylometry argument?
Yeah, I finished the first stylometry argument.
Okay, right. So I'm going to go into my slides. Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. So where I'm going to start with is with the Sirah. So I hope that's okay. We'll just go into Sirah. I'll come over to Hadith a little bit later.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to start. Let me see if this is working here. It seems to be. Oh, do you know what I'm doing? I'm hitting the wrong button here. 1 second. So works that could have proven the reliability of the Islamic tradition mysteriously were not preserved. According to Islamic tradition, the first biographers of Prophet Muhammad were, and here are the whole list of names, which I'm not going to, just to save time, there's a list of names. So these are claimed, but none of these works exist today. And I think that's rather convenient. So as far as these are concerned, all we have is a claim that these works once existed. So it's a bit like the isnad claim, oh, there was a chain of isnads, but without there being anything to actually verify the isnads, it means nothing. It's just a claim, and a claim is not evidence. It's hard to imagine circumstances where none of these works were preserved. So the context of all of this is we have to imagine that there was this holy prophet called Muhammad, who was the most important person for the Arabs, and his story was amazing, and everyone wanted to know this story. And people went to the bother, supposedly, of writing his story down, right? So look at how many biographers we have here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this is not the full list. This is just the first 6. Got 6 authors here. Not a single one of these works have been preserved, right? I find if one of them got lost, if maybe half of them got lost, I could probably understand that. And I'd say, okay, things happen. People get careless. They go at it or whatever, But for all of these to be lost, I find that hard to believe. Now, I'm not saying it's not impossible, but I find that kind of implausible. Do you want to respond to that before we go on further?
Yes, sure. So, firstly, with regards to isnads, right? Again, like I said, if it's not the claim that isnads are reliable, that needs to be justified. The claim they are unreliable, the claim you are making needs to be justified. Both of them need to be justified. Firstly, secondly, with regards to these sources, just by looking at it, we actually have the works of these scholars. They are preserved in the work of later scholars in the isnads. And just to give one example here,
come on. That's not actually the same thing.
Actually, it is. And
it's not. If you look at, there are plenty of books down through history that reference earlier works, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that those works originally existed. If we don't have the works, we have less than 100% sureness that the works really existed. We might claim that they did exist because maybe the author who's writing is reliable, so we'd make a judgment on their reliability. You know what I mean? So actually, I think that stands what I've just said, is that these authors' works were not preserved, and even if later people claim that their own works is based on these earlier authors, all we have is their word for it. We don't know, because we're not living at the time that these authors say that these earlier one existed. As Nikolai here says, he just tried the bro, trust me. There.
Okay.
Do you want to respond to that? I don't find, if you had said to me, actually, we do have Irwin Ibn al-Zubair's work, it would be argument over. Okay, you have proven that, well, at least that they existed at that time. But the fact that you haven't got a single one, it's just literally a claim. And this is, we see a lot of this in the Islamic tradition. It's not, the problem you see, it's the context of all of this is in the context of widespread fabrication, where there's a massive suspicion of forgery going on. It's even more important that we have something reliable that we can actually depend on.
Just to add on this point, massive fabrication, right? That's a different argument for from sources or dating of sources. So just complete your point regarding the sources first. I'll then address that, and then we can go to mass fabrication.
Yeah.
Actually, no, after the sources, I'll make one argument, then you can go to fast.
Okay, so let me continue on here. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah, to complete your point on this.
Yeah. Okay. Islamic tradition teaches that these biographers were followed by Musa ibn Uqba, Muammar ibn Rashid, and Muhammad ibn Ishaq. Okay. Again, these are even later. None of these exist either. Again, that's rather convenient. Muslims can believe on faith that these once existed, but there's no evidence that they did. Now, if as I think, they only really started writing some form of biography, an official one, under Ibn Hisham, they obviously have a problem because they have a 200-year gap. So if they're trying to cover up a 200-year gap, which obviously is going to raise questions, why is there no biography for 200 years? They obviously will need to say, well, there was this author, his name was Musa ibn Uqba, he died 50 years ago, and he wrote a work as well, and and so on. So I think, I'm not saying it's not impossible, but we're have about a 200-year period where not a single work was preserved, and then suddenly in the 9th century, we're not talking 7th century, we're talking 9th century, a person called Ibn Hisham produces this book out of thin air, and with all these earlier works supposedly used in the making of it. So just to continue, unless you want to respond to that first.
I think I have to cover a lot of ground now, because I just let you complete your argument with regards to the first 2 century sources, right?
Do you want to just respond to that, and then I'll continue, because I still have a little bit on this argument here.
I actually have a lot to say in this regard. So just make the point regarding Ibn Hisham, and then I'll start.
Okay, let's carry on here for a second. Okay, so now supposedly Ibn Ishaq produced the Sirah 767 AD, on which Ibn Hisham based his via an intermediary. Again, he doesn't even have the original, he's using an intermediary again. According to Islamic tradition, the work was written by Ibn Hisham, who received, as I just said. We don't have a shred of prima facie evidence that a person called Ibn Ishaq actually wrote this. He may be a real person, but we don't know for certain without having the original. All we have is a claim in the mouth of Ibn Hisham, in what may be a way to explain away the non-existence of Ibn Ishaq's work. We get strange reports from Muslim scholars that he was a forger. So Malik ibn Anas called him Dajjal min Dajjalia, the quack of many quacks, and al-Bukhari didn't trust him. Okay, just continuing on that. So Muslim scholars throw Ibn Ishaq under the bus, but I can't see the thing that's underneath it. But yes, Ibn Hisham is meant to be trustworthy. So it feels like the Sirah is built on sand, right? Faced with a non-existence Sirah from Ibn Ishaq, we're faced with a dilemma. This is it. I'll just finish this point here. A little bit more, but I'll throw it back to you. We're faced with a dilemma of possibilities of which neither is ideal. Ibn Ishaq did truly write an attempted biography of Muhammad 135 years after the fact, and this got censored and rewritten by Ibn Hisham, which means his biography is a suppression and distortion of his earlier work. So we don't have a single copy of Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Hisham didn't have an earlier work from Ibn Ishaq. That's the other possibility, which means it can be dismissed as a fiction written 2 centuries after the supposed events. Either scenario is the death knell for the reliability of the Sirah. So please feel free to respond.
Okay. How about you move it to the first slide you brought?
Yeah, you tell me which one you want.
Back.
This one?
Back. What's before this?
This one? Okay.
What's before this?
Oh.
Okay, move it to the next one.
Oh, the next one, okay.
So firstly, I'll address from here till I'll go to your slides. Then I have to show some things from my slide, right, after this.
Perfect, okay.
So, I basically let my interlocutor complete his argument regarding the sources, because I think it's important, to get the entire thing out. Now I'll be basically going through all of this. Firstly, with regards to the point about isnad, right? He just said that just because isnad's there, right, we don't have anything else, that's unreliable. This is not an argument. Again, if isnads are reliable is a claim, they are unreliable is a claim. Both claims need to be justified, and if he's not going to justify that, but just saying that it's not so unreliable, then...
Can I just respond to that? The isnad is just a claim. That's all it is. It's not evidence.
It's not our method of sourcing.
But it's not. It's not. Can I just make the point? It is categorically just a claim. It's not evidence.
Mel?
Yeah.
You have said your bit regarding the isnad, right? Now, let me just go through it from start to finish,
Yeah.
and then you can respond, because I actually let you speak for a really long time.
Yeah, no, feel free.
Okay, so again, isnads are method of sourcing. They are a method of like historical sourcing, right? I have to prove they are reliable. He has to prove they are unreliable. Just saying they are isnads and therefore we assume that they are unreliable, that's not going to work, because that's not giving evidence. That's assumption. Now, all of these authors that are named here, right? Their works are actually preserved in later sources. But more than that, we actually have a letter from Urwa ibn al-Zubair. I'm pretty sure about this. I think Patricia Crone or someone else published that. This is there in our historical sources. Aban bin Uthman, I think he's in Isnad. Wahab ibn Munabbih. We actually have a very early sahifa from his brother, Hammam ibn Munabbih, that basically contains, I think, 130 these 99 of which are in Bukhari and Muslim, word for word. And I think 132 of those are in Musnad Ahmad, almost word for word. So that shows the reliability of later records. Sharabil ibn Sa'd and Abu Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn Hazm, they are also in Isnad. And I'll make an argument for reliability of Isnad later. Keep this in mind. Also, as far as Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri is concerned, again, read the work of Harold Modsky on this. We actually have a lot of his work preserved. And how do we know this? Because he does source criticism on narrations from him from three students: Imam Malik ibn Anas, Imam Mamar, and I think Imam ibn Junayd is the third one. So I could be wrong. And basically, by comparing the works of all three of those, by seeing the massive similarities in them, this is how we know these narrations go back to Imam al-Zuhri. This is there. This is it. Now, I'm not making this up. This is something that Harold Modsky literally argues. I think in his compendium book with Sean Anthony, and there's a third guy, I can't pronounce the name of that third person. They basically have 7 articles. Harold Modsky has a specific article on the reliability of the narrations from Imam Zuhri, and by comparing the narrations from his students, this is how we can show reliability of his works. So the claim that none of these exist today, especially with regards to Imam Zuhri, Urwa ibn al-Zubair, and Wahab ibn Munabbih, these claims are just blatantly false, and the rest of the others will be dependent on isnads. Can you move to the next slide, please?
Yeah, I would say none of that disproves the possibility that they could have been fabricated later. So without any earlier works in existence, I think it's just a claim. And I remember that the discussion here is about historical reliability. None of the isnad argument works in terms of historical reliability. It's fine within the Islamic tradition where everything is on faith, but if we're talking about historical reliability, it doesn't work.
I actually let you speak for a really long time for this reason.
But right? I will. We are cross-examining each other, so I have to respond to your point. Do you want me to move on to the next slide?
No, actually, I'll just say something in this regard again. Isnads being reliable or unreliable are both claims. You are just dismissing them without showing they are unreliable. You have the burden of proof for that. So just like I have burden proof for showing they are reliable. So just like talking about isnad again and again, saying they are unreliable.
Okay. If you want to go beyond it being a claim, you're going to have something solid from history to actually prove. But we're not going to labor on this isnad thing, so we'll move on. Was there anything else in the later slides you want me?
For isnad, right?
I really don't want to spend
reliability of.
I don't want to spend an hour and a half talking about isnads. I don't find them compelling. I haven't heard anything that's compelling.
Again and again. You don't want to talk about it. Don't bring up the topic again, because you brought it first. Now I'm addressing it, and then you want to address it again, and you don't want me to respond. I'm not.
No, it's fine if you bring up something new, but what I'm saying to you is, what I'm hearing from you, I'm not hearing anything that actually proves the point. All I'm hearing is a bigger and bigger claim about the same point. So we'll move on. We're going to agree to disagree on this one.
No, actually, before that, just to point out one thing, I gave multiple arguments here for the reliability of isnad. Firstly, the studies from Harold Modsky, right? Again, and these are non-Muslim scholars who is doing source analysis on isnads. So this is not just something he can dismiss easily. My interlocutor cannot just dismiss these things easily. Second, I gave an argument from the criterion of dissimilarity. This is present again and again in these records. My interlocutor never addressed it. Thirdly, with regards to Imam Zuhri, I gave an argument that we have narrations from three of his students claiming to have works from him. All three of those are nearly identical, and this is the argument Motsky makes. So we have reliable narrations from Imam Zuhri. Fourthly, I gave a fourth argument in this regard.
We don't need to. Okay, I get the point. We don't need to repeat ourselves.
Well, you said I made no argument, so I'm just repeating.
I've heard these arguments already, so you don't need to repeat them. So
why did you say I made no arguments? Fourth point, this is the last point in this regard.
Okay.
Fourth point, I mentioned the Sahifa of Hammam ibn Munabbih. That is a first century work that has identical ahadith as in third century works. So the reliability of Snad and transmission system is established from that. These are four arguments in this regard. Can you move to the next slide, please?
Okay.
Okay. As far as the condition, the sources of Musa bin Uqba, Muhammad ibn Rashid, and Muhammad ibn Ishaq, we have actually just recently discovered the Sirah of Musa ibn Uqba. You can go look at this on Wikipedia right now. It was discovered and published. So this claim is false. The claim is you can look at Wikipedia. Don't take my word on this. It's there. It's published again. So this claim is false. As far as the source of Imam Ma'mar bin Rashid is concerned, this is present in Musannaf Abdul Razak. This is preserved, and Aaron Motsky and other scholars like him argue for this reason from the criterion of dissimilarity. So that's preserved as well. As for the Sirah of Muhammad ibn Ishaq, right, that is preserved in the work of Imam Tabri. That is preserved in the work of Ibn Hisham. Moreover, and this is something Orientalists also accept. Gulam Dai was an Orientalist. I think he basically translated his own version of basically Sirat ibn Ishaq. There's an English translation of this. Christians bring this up again and again. Like they literally bring this up all the time. So these things are there. So can you move to the next slide, please?
Yeah, I do want to just respond to that. What I'm hearing from you, at least one or two of the ones that you mentioned, you're saying that were preserved in later works. We've already covered that ground. That really a more reliable one would be if it was preserved from the time. We'll let that one go.
Mel, who decides the criteria for reliability? And by the way, this is how earlier sources are preserved in later sources. This is literally how history is preserved. And even non-Muslim scholars accept this point. With regards to Sirat ibn Ishaq, they reconstructed it. Muslims didn't reconstruct Sirat ibn Ishaq, Orientalists did. And so that point is gone. The point about Imam Ma'mar ibn Rashid, that source is in Musannaf ibn Razak. Again, that can be easily argued using the criterion of dissimilarity and the arguments Motsky makes. That's preserved. We have discovered the manuscript. It was a lost book. Now we have discovered the Sirat of Musa ibn Uqba. Look it up on Wikipedia. I'm not lying about this. It was discovered last year. So
okay, that's new to me. I didn't see that. Okay. Okay,
now I'll address this third slide regarding Ibn Hisham and Ibn Ishaq, right? So, Sirat ibn Ishaq is basically, the first point is that it is known via an intermediary. So what? This is how historical records are not. This is how narrations work. How is this an argument? Firstly. Secondly, I'll address the point about Imam Malik bin Anas calling Ibn Ishaq Dajjal min al-Dajjal, right? This doesn't work as an argument because if you look at the historical record, there are massive difference of opinions and there existed a massive conflict between Imam Malik ibn Anas and Ibn Ishaq. This is well known. Just because two people are enemies of each other, right? They will speak against each other. That doesn't mean their works they are basically liars. I can be an enemy with numerous people. That doesn't mean one of us has to be a liar. Both of us can be speaking the truth. In fact, I'll give an argument for reliability of hadith just from this. Ibn Ishaq and Imam Malik, both of them had major differences. Yet the seerah or the narrations they are narrating are actually highly similar. If this is the case, right, that shows that those narrations, those works are authentic because people who are highly opposed to each other are agreeing on that. And if they were false, it's unlikely they would agree with each other. As far as Imam Bukhari didn't trust him, some people can be unreliable in hadith. That doesn't mean they are liars because Let me just give one. Actually, can give numerous examples. There are numerous.
I'm giving you a lot of time here, so I need to respond.
How much time did I give you? I'm pretty sure I gave you
I'm-
more time than this, a lot more time than
The
this.
audience can respond to that one, but I'm giving you a lot of time. Just saying, I'm giving you a lot of time.
I gave you more time without interrupting.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so as far as Imam Bukhari or meaning someone else not trusting a particular person, right? This doesn't help you because we have a lot of people in our record who we know are honest, yet we don't take hadith from them. Why? Because they maybe they report weak narrations, or maybe their memory is not that good. There are multiple reasons. So this doesn't work as an argument.
Okay, I'll just very quickly respond. I'll just because we have a lot of ground to cover. So, the idea behind this is a really simple point. If someone is saying that a certain person is unreliable, generally speaking, that means for whatever it's worth, it means that their hadiths are less reliable. That's the point. We're not saying it. Maybe there's a little bit of truth to them, but it just means that they're not as reliable as someone who is honest.
Actually, no.
No. Okay, let's move on because I'm not going to spend an hour on this point. Honestly, shall we move on?
Here's what's not going to happen. You can't have last word on everything and don't expect the other person to...
I'm not spending an hour on one minor point.
Then why do you want the last word? It's not about...
Okay, just move on. I'm giving you... you've responded to me. I'm giving you time to continue with your argument. So I'm back to your slides.
I'll just address one point regarding this. Just because someone has a bad memory, for instance, he said that if someone's unreliable, that means they are dishonest, or that makes it more likely they are dishonest. This is not the case. If someone has bad memory, they can be unreliable, but that doesn't mean they are dishonest. Can you move to my records now, my slides now? Okay. I'll just give one reference from a Western historian, a Western military historian named Russ Roger, regarding this issue of the sources. Because to be honest, there are a lot of false claims made by Christians and Orientalists and atheists in this regard, while not recognizing the problem of the sources. Give me one moment. Here it is. This is from the book Journalship of Muhammad ﷺ by Russ Rogers, and I think this really addresses the problem of the sources. With these thoughts in mind, are we possibly seeing example in the critiques of some writers not only of our religious bias but also forms of cultural and chronological chauvinism? Why are Western documents such as Tacitus's histories or Caesar's Gallic Wars accepted largely at face value, but sources couched in religious constructs are so eagerly rejected out of hand? For example, Tacitus's histories as handed to us today are based on few manuscripts dated approximately 900 years after the time he allegedly wrote the work. Caesar's Gallic Wars suffered from the same problem, but being based on a few manuscripts dated 900 to 1000 years after the fact. Yet, these are almost universally accepted as truly written by these individuals and are even considered largely factual. Moreover, if they are the only sources of an event, they are typically accepted as is. Why is such a benefit of the doubt not accorded to early Islamic sources? In contrast to these two Western classics, the materials of early Islamic sources date anywhere from 120 years to 300 years after the event. Actually, we can reduce this time. And in these written form handed down from the previous oral transmission since that time. So as I think this is a clear-cut refutation of the dating of the sources or sources being late contention.
So just very briefly to respond to that, the reason why classic historical works are trusted in a way that Islamic histories, in inverted commas, are not, is because they don't follow the same methodologies. That's it in a nutshell. If Islamic sources were following the same methodologies of objectivity and avoiding bias, then they would be trusted without doubt.
Can you prove bias, and can you prove that the methodology of Islamic sources is flawed? Because I will go into this later, but since you are making a claim here, you do have to prove it.
It's going to send us off in a bit of a tangent, but basically, the historical method of history has been going on since classical times, and historians from centuries ago followed a particular way of sourcing their arguments. So, for example, just one example of a difference is they wouldn't just simply make an isnad argument. Your audio is cracking there. They wouldn't just make an isnad argument. They would basically reference early documentary evidence. This is why we're not kind of agreeing on the isnad thing, is because the classic historian way. Sorry, just a second. The classic historian approach would be to reference early coins, early documents, and whereas the typical Islamic one will accept later preservation of works and consider that okay. So it's just a different approach. That's why. I'm trying to keep it brief.
Let me just respond to this point. This claim does not work. You have sources from 1,000 years after the event. As far as the isnads are concerned, again, you haven't given an argument against their reliability. You are just saying they are there and we accept historical, basically manuscripts and coins, etc. But you have manuscripts from nearly 1,000 years after the event. So this response was nonsensical.
Well, I don't necessarily think that documents like the ones that you mentioned are brilliantly historically reliable. If they come from 1,000 years afterwards, so that isn't my position. There's probably lots of things have happened to the reliability over the centuries. So I don't. Do you know what I mean?
Are considered reliable. That was your first argument. Now you're changing that.
No, if you're talking, well, let's be clear. If you're talking about a document that was written about a history from 1,000 years before, that is not on the same level of reliability as something that is contemporary, is it?
No history is at the same level as contemporary, because
that's my point. Okay. Now, please, I'm not going to challenge any more on that. Carry on.
Reliability or unreliability.
Yeah, let's.
I'll carry on, but you didn't address the point about the sources. So should I make an argument now?
Carry on, please. Yeah, carry on. I'll keep my cross-examination short.
Okay. I'll make a second argument from stylometry. This is actually an independent argument. So there are two stylometric studies that have been done on Sahih and fabricated hadith. One of them I've linked here, right? And there's another one as well by a scholar called Rahim Server. And if you want, like, I have a video on this, I've linked those stuff there as well. So the argument is basically very simple. The Orientalist claim is, or the Christian claim, or whatever, the claim is that all or most of the ahadith were more or less fabricated. If they are fabricated within a specific pattern or a literary style, this is what some Orientalists try to respond to this, right? We should accept all those ahadiths to be either very similar or very different, because they can be very similar if they are fabricated in the same linguistic style. They can be very different because there are hundreds of people reporting those narrations, right? One author, one style. That can be expected in this regard. But this is what would be happen. This is what would happen if these are fabricated. But
sorry, can I just clarify with you? What are you saying? Are you saying that if hadith were fabricated, you'd expect them to be stylistically different, or are you saying that they should be the same? No. Which is it?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying if ahadith are fabricated, right? Yeah. And they are fabricated within the same linguistic style, we should expect Sahih and fabricated hadith, all of the hadith, to be similar because they are being fabricated in the same linguistic style, right?
Why would they have to be similar?
Because they are fabricated in the same linguistic style.
I don't know if I'm following you. So,
okay,
why would you expect it to be on? Like, couldn't fabricators, if they wanted to fabricate them in the same style, they could fabricate them in a different style? It doesn't follow. Fabricators, people who are out to forge things can do it in whatever style they would like. It could be the same or different.
Actually, no, there's a very simple reason.
Okay.
If there are a lot of ahadith already present, our corpus is expected, right? Like there is already present there some things that are accepted as authoritative. Then, if the fabricator wants his stuff to be accepted, it has to be similar to the things that are already recognized. Think about this. This is very simple. If, for example, someone is trying to fake Shakespeare, right? Someone is trying to forge something like Shakespeare's, and if they bring something up, some new work up that they are forging, it has to be similar to Shakespeare for it to be accepted. If it is different from Shakespeare's work, everyone would reject it out of hand. This is not something complicated, right? Now, if if they are fabricated and in a similar style, they should be Sahih and fabricated hadith should be both stylistically similar. But if there are some actual authentic ahadith and some fabricated ahadith, we should expect the stylometrically Sahih and fabricated hadith to be very different. The simple reason being one set of them is authentic, another one is not. This is what we find. We have stylometric studies that can distinguish or differentiate between Sahih and fabricated hadith up to 92%. There is another study that can do it basically 70 to 78%. That was an earlier study. This is a later study with newer criteria. It can differentiate between authentic and fabricated ahadith up to 92%. If these ahadiths were all made up, they would be similar. But if some ahadiths actually go back to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and some are made up, this would be the case. The Sahih and fabricated hadiths would be very different, which they are. So this shows hadith preservation because it matches the expectation of what would be the case if a hadith actually go back to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Sahih ones at least. You can respond.
What's that? I'm not going to respond. I don't actually think that's a great argument. You can fabricate things to be similar or different as you want. So I don't. That doesn't lead us to. Can I just make the point? It doesn't tell us whether the source of these is true. We don't know where it came from. So it could have been originally concocted in the 7th, 8th, or 9th century. So it doesn't help us. It might help within an Islamic school. It might help them to maybe distinguish between what they consider to be stronger or weaker hadiths according to their own criteria. But beyond that, outside of that, I don't see how that works. But are you finished your argument?
No, just to respond to this point, firstly, I gave a reason for why they need to be similar. You didn't address the point about Shakespeare, and it was not a complicated one. It was a very simple one.
Okay, so let me address that. Do you want me to address that one? Is it?
Yeah, sure. Address it then.
Okay. So right. So, right. So, if what you're saying is someone was trying to duplicate Shakespeare. If it was similar to Shakespeare, very similar, they would think it was Shakespeare, and if it was different, it wasn't Shakespeare, right? Is that the point?
If Shakespeare has a particular style, right, and someone comes up with an unknown book that is claimed to be from Shakespeare, but it has an entirely different style, why would anyone in their right mind accept it's the work of Shakespeare? In fact,
okay, I got the yeah. I'm just clarifying that I've understood you. Okay. Right, so our audience here, I'm sure, watch lots of series on TV. For example, I'll just give you one example. The Castle. The Castle has a similar style from episode to episode. The characters have a certain way of speaking. There's a certain plot line and so on. And to look at it, you would say, wow, that's amazing. The author's really consistent right through the series. But actually, they have a bunch of different writers. Some write some episodes. Sometimes you have a team of people working on the same episode. And so essentially that argument that you've just given doesn't work. You actually have plenty of examples down through, you could look at any literary form you like. You'll find plenty of examples of people being able to follow an in-house style of storytelling. There's no reason why you can't actually duplicate stories. So I don't find that very compelling.
Okay, just to
Okay.
respond to this point, right? So since there are different writers, usually they can tell that if a particular writer is writing a particular episode because of the themes he usually uses. Secondly, stylometry can actually, the reason I brought up the point about Shakespeare, it can actually distinguish between the works of Shakespeare and other forgers. In fact, if you look at Wikipedia, look at the wiki article on stylometry. It is usually normally used for this purpose. In fact, there was a play that was originally thought to be Shakespeare's, but doing bias with because of a stylometric analysis, it was realized it's not the work of Shakespeare. So stylometry is even used in this regard. Do you want to? You can respond to this, and then we can make.
I don't think I need to say any more on it, so I'm going to. Can I move on to my next argument?
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's see where we're at. I may have to just skip on a bit here. Okay, so just in terms of Ibn Hisham's Sirah, okay, Ibn Hisham's is probably the gold standard for Sirah. Now, if I think I may have mistyped it here, but we don't actually have his original. We only have copies. All right. Only 2 such copies exist. The latter of the 2 are more heavily edited. So, which is more trustworthy, the earlier one or the one that was heavily edited? I would tend to go for the earlier one every time. Once you have later editions, it means that a person who lived at a later time thinks they know better than the earlier person. So there's that issue. It's not a major point there. Now,
Can I just
what could have been useful earlier books, had they existed, were not preserved, probably because they no longer are acceptable to later traditions. Okay.
Just let me respond to this point. Firstly, the point about not having originals. How many historical books do we have originals of? This doesn't work as a criteria. No historian in the right mind would say for Tacitus or Caesar's history, we need to have original Caesar's history or original Tacitus for their works to be accepted as reliable. This is just a made up criteria, and if it's brought without evidence, it can be rejected without evidence.
Okay, I'm going to move on. So it actually gets worse in terms of Ibn Ishaq. The edition of the Sirah commonly used today was created by Western Orientalists from the 19th century. What we know as Ibn Hisham's Sirah was actually produced in the 19th century by Heinrich Ferdinand Wustenfeld. He created the Sirah used today in 1858 to 1860, based on earlier manuscripts. He had to make decisions between competing and often contradictory versions. It is this Western Orientalist that Muslims turn to for what they know of Muhammad. So, like when we're talking about Ibn Hisham, it's people like his version that actually we're dealing with, not the original. Do you want to respond to that before I move on?
Yeah, actually, we have Ibn Ishaq, like versions of it in our historical record. He wrote this particular Orientalist. He made his own version of it, but he did from our manuscripts that we use as well. Secondly, we have Sirat Ibn Ishaq. It is preserved in later works, and this is how historical records are preserved in journal. Thirdly, go look up the wiki article on Musa ibn Uqba. We have just discovered his Sirah. It is even earlier than Ibn Ishaq's. So, like, this claim is basically this is a dead argument. Do you want to make a second argument, or should I?
I'm not finished the point.
Okay.
Okay. So so this is a little bit more information about that guy. Your claim there about an earlier work, I haven't. With that need to be confirmed later. Maybe you can share the link to that in the chat. But right. Now, Wustenfeld produced a number of most important editions of classical Arabic texts, such as those by Ibn Isham. As these editions do not follow the principle, no, not in the private chat, but actually in the public chat, just so that people can check for themselves. As these editions, just maybe, can you not see the chat overlay? Just go. There's different.
Wiki link in the public chat.
1 second. Okay. Right now, Let me just come out of there. So as these editions do not follow the principles of classical Arabic, their value varies depending on the manuscripts on which they are based. Let me just go a bit further. Okay, I think I'll come back. I can come back to that. Do you want me to pass it back to you now?
Sure.
Okay. Let me just. Sorry, I've done that. There we go. There we go. Okay.
Okay. I don't think I can move it yet. Okay, it's moving now. Give me one moment. So basically, I'll be making two interlinked arguments now. This is the argument for reliability of Islamic military narratives and logistics. Basically, just to give a background, the historian I mentioned earlier, Russ Rogers, in his book *The Generalship of Muhammad*, basically in the introductory chapter, he argues for the reliability of Islamic historical records from both logistics and the narratives. Logistic being basically if you are going to an expedition or a war, how many camels you need, how many foods you eat. These things are recorded in our historical records, and these match what would be accepted. Hence, this is an argument for reliability of Islamic historical records. Secondly, the argument he makes is from criterion of dissimilarity, because there are numerous stories like this that no one would have made up, and if they were dishonest, they wouldn't have preserved. Because of the criterion of dissimilarity, these things have to be authentic. Now, I'll first read his reference, then I'll give examples. This is from the Generalship of Muhammad, page 16 to 17. Within the context of starting from the sources largely accepted as genuine within the Islamic movement, I depart from the approaches outlined by Fred Donner by accepting the received collections of Hadith literature, particularly regarding the military campaigns and operations. This naturally places my approach in contrast to the traditional critical approach, which sees much of the Hadith literature as late-date forgeries. The reason for my acceptance is both internal and based on the logistical analysis of the events. In this context, forgeries would not have been able to match the anecdotal recollections to the realities of logistics involved. Now, I'll just give some examples of the stories in our historical records, and they are literally countless of this. These simply would not have been made up, and if Muslims were dishonest, they would not have preserved this. First example, if Islamic historical records are made up, why is Abbas, anhu, the uncle of Prophet ﷺ, not a believer from the start? For most of the Sirah, he is a non-Muslim, and considering the fact that his lineage basically became the rulers of Muslims, if Muslims are fabricating isnads, Abbas anhu would have been a believer from the start, probably leading the battle at Badr. But this is not the case. This simply not would not have been made up by the Muslims, and if it was there, it would have been suppressed by the Muslims if the Muslims were dishonest. Second example, Prophet ﷺ would not have been surprised at Badr. If Muslims are making up their historical records, they are doing propaganda. Why was Prophet Muhammad ﷺ initially surprised at the Battle of Badr? Moreover, any evidence of Muslim complaining about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gentleness with Al-Abbas anhu, after basically when later in the Sirah he accepted Islam, would have been excised from the record. Yes, these things are present, and not just these things. The examples like this are literally countless. These simply wouldn't have been made up. And if you are using the criterion of similarity, these things would have to be accepted as reliable. Most of the Islamic historical records, for this simple reason, would be accepted as reliable. Now, just before Mel starts, I'll give the most common Orientalist contention to this and show the worthlessness of that. This is a quote from that book, the same book by the same Western historian. Naturally, those who take the skeptical approach would state that all of these instances are elements of the mythos that was developed to justify certain portions of the Quran. So basically, the claim against these is that these were made up to justify Quranic verses. Here's the funny thing. None of these things that I have mentioned, they are not in the Quran. They are not even mentioned in the Quran. The uncle of Prophet ﷺ, Abbas anhu, is simply not mentioned in the Quran. The second thing, being surprised at further, this is not mentioned at the Quran. the Sahaba complaining about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's gentleness with Al Abbas radiallahu anhu is simply not in the Quran. So even the contention that is made against this argument fails in principle. Now I'll just give a simple example of this for this argument, and this is really relevant. In the Quran, it is mentioned basically regarding Ghazwa Ahzab that a wind came, like it was a miraculous wind, and the kuffar left. Now, this happened according to the Hadith, but there is something in the Hadith that is not in the Quran. Basically, there was a companion who recently converted to Islam, and Jews and the kuffar did not know he had converted to Islam. That companion came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with a proposition that he would play a political trick on them to get them basically fighting. Why would any Muslim make this up? Wouldn't Muslims want to glorify their victory by saying this is just a miracle and that we fought and we killed all of them and they ran away? This is how propaganda would be done. This is how ahadith would be made. But this is not the case. The ahadith have the victory due to the miracle, but also due to a political trick. Why would Muslims make this up? Why would anyone in their right mind who's trying to do propaganda make this up? And if the Muslims are dishonest, this would be among the first things removed from the seerah. Yet it is there, and this shows the reliability and honesty of the Muslims and the reliability of Islamic historical records. You can respond to this argument.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously you think it's more authentic because these elements are in the story, correct?
I'm arguing from the criterion of dissimilarity. You want to have a discussion on that?
No, I'm not going to buy the argument of dissimilarity again. No, the argument you just made isn't about dissimilarity. It's the idea that these flaws that can you just let me speak? I've been very patient here.
Sure.
Right. So what the argument you're making is it has to be authentic because they would have, if the negative things in the story would have been airbrushed out if it'd been, if they were trying to make a forgery. Now, what you're assuming there is that the only way they could have made the story up was a hagiography, which is everything is airbrushed and everything is, the uncle of Prophet Muhammad, was a believer from the start. That's a hagiography. But actually, hagiographies aren't very compelling. A lot of people would doubt those. Whereas a story where they actually have, like, the uncle doesn't believe at the start, but then converts. If I was a forger, that's the story I would tell. So that's what I would say. That, like, it matches reality, and that would make it more compelling. So if I was trying to fool people, that's exactly what I would do. I wouldn't make up a story where, it was always, sunshine and light and everyone was good and no one did anything bad. That's not the story I would tell because no one would believe that. So I don't think that argument holds. And, forgers, like, there's a history of people who make forgeries, and they sometimes do intentional, what seems like mistakes in order to make a thing look more authentic. So but now the other side, I'm trying to look at both sides here. The history of the different battles, I actually agree with the author, that we, taking into account logistics and things like that actually is a good argument. I will give you that. Now, recently on this channel, I can't remember the name of the author. Perhaps you remember an author from the middle of the 8th century who wrote about the battles in the 630s. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Maybe it's Al-Waqidi. Maybe it's someone else.
Sure. I can't. I'll have to look. I think his name had Umar in it. I may be wrong. Now, there was a Persian scholar called Puri Shariati did a study on that work. Now, her arguments, the way she approached assessing whether that set of battles was real or historically reliable, was that she looked at the reign of the various Persian kings, right, and matched it up with the story, right? I found that compelling. Now, the dating was out, but actually, if you change the Anno Hijra to change it to 617, not 622, then suddenly the stories line up. The stories found in the Persian sources, which are just pure stories of the kings, you know, the reigns of the different kings, then it lined up. Now, obviously, those are just purely stories of battles that are found in that work. So I'm not completely what's the word for it? Antagonistic about all the sources. Like, I think those battle stories where they're just talking about the Arabs going through Iraq and so forth, they do line up with the Persian source. At least they've got some of the dating correct. So I wouldn't completely dismiss it. Do you follow what I've said?
Yeah, but I don't think a lot of that was related to my argument. Just to can I just address the few points that were regarding the criterion of dissimilarity and all of this?
I don't think it was an argument from dissimilarity. I think you were making an argument that the imperfections in the character of the people in the story is an argument for its authenticity. But I all I said was that actually that would be what a forger would do, would actually make the characters a little bit less than perfect.
All of this. Let me address this.
Yeah.
Firstly, the criterion of dissimilarity is basically this, and you can read a Barterman on this, or literally anyone else. If a historical source or someone is telling something that is against their interest to report, that makes them look in a bad light, that is more likely to be true because it is unlikely to be forged or made up. This is the criterion of dissimilarity, firstly. Secondly, the criterion of dissimilarity is one of the most accepted criteria in the historical method. You can't just simply dismiss that out of hand. And the fact that it applies on so many things, not just one or two, literally numerous amount of things, refutes your point. Because again, if I'll just give an example of a test. If let me just finish this point.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
If I am cheating on a test, right, and I want to make
you've done this one before. Listen, we don't want to go over the same ground. Can you just
literally the same point? Let me just address this, right?
I don't want to hear your same arguments again. If you don't mind, just if you got a new argument, please say that. But please don't repeat the arguments. Thanks.
I think you were repeating the arguments as well.
Okay, go on. Go through this argument. I know what you're going to say. You're going to tell me about the guy cheating at the exams.
Okay, I'll actually give a different argument in this regard.
Here's the thing. Right?
I give a different argument. Look, I said
no. I don't need another argument. I've heard your argument. We don't. You're wasting everyone's time if you're going to say the same thing over and over.
Let me respond to this point.
Okay.
Because I let you speak for multiple times without interrupting. Let me finish this point. Firstly, regarding the criterion of dissimilarity, right? He's basically saying, my interlocutor is basically asking that the person making up the source would have to throw in some things so that it doesn't look like everything's made up. Yeah, you could argue that for one or two things. But when there are so many things in this regard, again and again, what's the point of making it up then if you're making yourself look bad?
You can fake it.
Let me finish this point. Secondly, why would to
make it look real? That's why you would do it. It's just your argument makes no sense. You would do it if you're forging. If you're forging, you would do it exactly for that reason. Do you not get it? If we were forging a story, that's why you would do it. You're saying, why wouldn't someone do that?
To make yourself look bad. And by the way, would you forge a story to make yourself look bad again and again, not just on one or two things, on hundreds of things?
It doesn't matter. It still shows it looks.
This literally defeats the purpose of forgery.
There's loads of embarrassing things that we can bring them up later, but let's move on. I think we both made our point in this. Okay, we're not. I don't agree with the argument.
Another argument.
And some Christians use the same argument, but I don't agree. You can fake that, so I think let's go on. Have you finished your slides on this argument?
Yeah.
Okay, right. I'll go to Fred Donner next. Okay, so I'm just going to be. I'll read a little bit. Let me see. Where are we? Fred Donner says that during the late 19th and early 20th century, manuscripts of a number of important early Arabic sources first became known to Western scholars, Western scholars began to search for new texts and to collate, catalogue, and edit these they deemed of special value for early Islamic history, such as things like the Seer and so forth. Let me just move on to the next bit. Far from clarifying the historical development of early Islam, according to Fred Donner, however, this wealth of new material produced a gathering awareness of unsuspected complexities in the sources that raised doubts about the veracity of the traditional picture of early Islam. Particularly troubling in this respect were numerous instances of glaring contradictions among different sources, or of logical and chronological absurdity, implausibility, or patent sectarian or political bias. This new perception of the complexity and perhaps the unreliability of the Islamic narratives, which the descriptive approach was woefully inadequate to explain, was instrumental in generating another approach to early Islamic history. So just in a nutshell, what Fred Donner is saying is they found all these sources, they expect everything to confirm Islamic history, and to their surprise, they found loads and loads of historical problems, which led them to question its historical reliability. So going from there, he says that because the source problems had been noted in narrative accounts.
Just one thing. Do you want? I can either address the point about Fred Donner now, or I can let you finish, and then then I can address.
I can come back to it. I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. You can finish your point, right? I will let you, but then let me finish my point.
Listen, I always give you time to respond. Because of the source problems had first been noted in narrative accounts, most of the effort of the source critical approach was directed at developing ways to explain the existence of divergent accounts. So what they're seeing is divergent accounts, and they haven't a dog in the fight here. They're independent. You know, many of these don't have any negative, as we'll see some examples there. They don't have a negative attitude. They're just trying to explain things. And to identify which of several divergent accounts should be deemed most trustworthy. So their idea is to basically try and explain why are there divergent accounts, and basically within them, which could be deemed most trustworthy, if any. So let me just skip on from that. That wasn't. Oh, okay. I'll let you come back. So that's. If I can go back here a second. So the point here, in terms of the reasoning behind why the source critical approach has happened in the 19th century, is just simply an objective fact that what the scholars found was that there was divergence in the story. This is very different to your idea that everything is hunky-dory, all the narratives just match up nicely and everything is great and there's no contradictions and we can rely on this history. But actually what they found was something different. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes. Basically, I'll do this response in two parts. Firstly, I'll address the point of general credibility and bias regarding the question of Western scholars and Islam. Secondly, then I'll refute basically the specifics, although they really weren't given any. Can you move? Okay, I'll just address the first point regarding the bias and credibility of Western scholars, Orientalists in general. Here's a very simple criteria for a particular scholars or source to be authorities to be reliable. And this is something. Just a very simple example and clear cut. Biblical scholars like Bart Ehrman, like John Dominic Crossan, like numerous other biblical scholars are actually able to debate and defend their arguments against Christians. Whether you agree with their arguments or not is irrelevant to this point. They are at least debating and defending their arguments. Orientalists are too scared to debate Muslims. They never debate Muslims. Why should any Muslim take their claim seriously, or anyone in general? Think about this. We have two groups. One group can defend their arguments. The other cannot defend their arguments.
Have you any evidence to back that up? Or is that just a wild claim?
just let me finish my point, and then I'll bring the evidence. Or if Orientalists cannot even debate Muslims while biblical scholars are debating Christians again and again, why should Orientalists be taken seriously? Think about this. There are two groups here. One that can defend its argument, the other that is too scared to. Why would anyone treat them equal? No one in the right mind would. Regarding the evidence of Orientalists not debating Muslims, when was the last time an Orientalist debated a Muslim?
Oh
Literally.
Is that your argument? Right. Listen, you're diverging from the thing here.
This is a response to your argument.
This is
Mel,
wild.
I let you finish your point. Mel, I did let you finish your point. Let me finish mine. Okay. So firstly, this is a simple reason for Orientalists not being credible. Secondly, and by the way, these are the same points that Western historian Russ Rogers, who's not an Orientalist, he's a military historian, made. This is literally the same point he was making in this regard. If you look at that reference again, he was addressing Fred Donner, which is why I thought it was funny that he brought up Fred Donner. Secondly, with regard to the examples of contradictions, right? Again, give me something specific. Otherwise, what's brought without you're just making claims. You're not giving specific examples.
I'm not making the claim. The scholars are making the claims.
You have to justify his claim. What's the example of this? Because when I brought up Harold Mutsky, I gave his argument. When I brought up Russ Rogers, I posted his argument here. What's the argument of Fred Donner?
Okay, I think he's got.
Mel, let me finish this point. Right now, how can you know that Fred Donner and basically all these other Orientalists are unreliable? Firstly, the first argument I gave, but let's ignore that for a minute. Fred Donner is the guy who's claiming that basically the Christians were also accepted as Muslims, basically a liberal perennialist understanding of Islam that guy basically is trying to promote, right? Here's a problem with that. We have first century manuscripts of the Quran, and it explicitly says that the Christians and others are not Muslims. He is refuted.
Okay, you're making a speech here. Can you just make your point? You said you had two little arguments. Just give us the two and I'll respond.
I'm speaking less than you. I'm literally.
You're actually speaking longer than it took for me to make the argument. Now, come on.
Finish this point.
Come on, just make it quick. I'm losing patience with you. Come on, make it quick.
I was losing patience with you as well, but
come on. I'll start timing if you're not being fair now. Come on.
Well, I don't think you are being fair. So again, the simple refutation of Fred Donner's nonsensical claims is this. Read the Quran. We have very early manuscripts of the Quran, and it clearly says, it directly contradicts most of Fred Donner's claims. This is how weak and pathetic the Orientalist position is.
Okay, can I respond? Okay, I'm going to respond. Sorry, you're going on nearly 5-10 minutes on what was meant to be just a quick cross-examination, right? So here's the thing.
A quick cross-examination.
Fred Donner is just quoting.
It has gone.
Can you listen to me? Right? Fred Donner is just simply quoting what the historical situation was in the 19th century. Right? Let's go back. Right? Here is he just describing what happened in the 19th century. Can you just listen?
Give me an example of it, because when I mentioned
he has a whole book. I'm not going through. Listen, I'm not going through a whole book. There is
one argument.
I haven't got it to hand. I can. So
you have one argument of his.
Okay, I'm going to list. I'm going to just respond, and because I want to move on, if you don't mind. Okay. So here, what he's all he's doing here, he's not claiming this himself. He's just literally describing what happened in the 19th century. So that's the first thing. The second thing, you're arguing about Islamic Orientalists not taking part in debates. I have watched countless scholars having debates online. So that's just not true. Okay, so I'm going to move on.
Give me one debate. Link one debate of Fred Donner or any of these revisionists.
Fred Donner, I will have to look it up. I can't just off the top look up, but I've seen numerous ones. If anyone wants to just go and look up, if anyone wants to just put into the chat an example of a debate between both sides. Are you telling me it doesn't happen? That's just nonsense. That's just nonsense. You're just making stuff up now.
Look, YouTube's open. Give one.
Right. I'll be quite happy to look it up, but I've seen various scholars arguing. I actually
You can post a video on your YouTube channel.
I can't, off the top. I'm not going to be able to do it because I want to continue the debate. But okay, let's look it up then. And are you going to admit you are lying if I give you an example?
Give me a debate between one Orientalist, Fred Donner, or any other scholar who has actually graduated, right? And them debating a Muslim, not an interview with a Western, with a white, with basically a Christian or anything. Debate.
Oh, so you're narrowing it down now. Let me just example. Let me say.
How did I narrow it down? I first said debate with a Muslim. I'm saying again debate with a Muslim. How did I narrow it down? Till then, can I open my slides for my next part?
Okay, I'll just give you an example. Okay, here's one. I'll just leave it in the chat. Sorry, what happened there? Okay, so here's one example. Hey, Smith and Jamal, they're very good. Thank you.
Can you share the link with me in private?
And this is another one. A guy called. Let me see. I haven't got the name here. James White is another example who's the basis.
James White is not an Orientalist. He's a Christian apologist.
Let me see.
He's not an Orientalist. You need to give one example of an Orientalist debating Muslims.
Okay. I wonder, has it got anything to do with the fact that they are generally don't do anything other than lecture and write books? But anyway, I'll come back to it. No, I obviously I can't find one offhand, but we'll come back to it, and I will see if I can find one later, and I'll leave it in the chat. Okay. Now, do you want to go on with the argument?
Yeah. Can you switch to my slides? So basically, I've been around here for 1 hour 27 minutes, right? I'll make one argument, then Mel can choose to make one more argument, and then we'll end this. Let me look at it. Let me decide which argument I'll use now. Oh yeah, this is the argument I'll be using. So my next argument is basically again from the criterion of dissimilarity. This is basically from all the hadiths and stories praising Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu. Now he was mentioning Sirat ibn Ishaq, right? Keep this in mind. This was compiled or written in the time of the Abbasids, and the Shias, the supporters of Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu, were fighting the Abbasids. If you look at this Sirah, from start to finish, there are hadiths and events praising Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is making hijrah, he leads Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu to return his belongings. In Badr and Uhud, Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu is one of the leading warriors. Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu is highly praised in the Sirah and Sunni hadiths. If these reports were made up, right, either by the Abbasids or the Umayyads, they would never have hadiths and narrations praising Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu. Yet this is present again and again. Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu is the hero of Battle of Khaybar Raziyallahu anhu, where that is a massive honor in Islam. Just read that report. If the Umayyads and Abbasids were making narrations up, right, or even the Sunni scholars who were dealing with Shias were making narrations up, why would they make this up? Think about this. Why would, for example, America make up propaganda where they are the villains and Russia is the good guy? This is literally equivalent of what is happening here, and this is happening in ahadith again and again. If ahadith and Sirah were largely fabricated or made up, this would never be there. This is the one thing that would never be there, yet this is in Sirah and ahadith again and again. If this thing is present and it would never be made up, this shows the reliability of Sunni ahadith, because it shows the sincerity of the people reporting ahadith. They did not remove the things that were against their interest here. There is simply no way around this argument. You can respond.
I've nothing to say on the matter. I've already addressed this already.
Okay, so you can make your argument.
Okay. No, okay. So just going to mention a few different things here. Kitani, so we're going to mention a few different scholars have looked at the Hadiths. Kitani concluded that we can find almost nothing true on Muhammad in the traditions. We can discount as apocryphal all the traditional material that we possess. Lamans also says the great majority of traditions from the Prophet are documents not of the time to which they claim to belong, but of the successive stages of development of doctrines during the first centuries of Islam. Lamans noted the artificial character and absence of critical sense in those. I'm just going to move on. I've mentioned Donner, so I'm just going to skip Donner. It's kind of covering similar ground. Let me just give. I might go to. Seeing it was a short in time. Here's a few quotations from Robert Hoyland in God's Path. These are kind of examples of fabrication. I spent a year sitting with Umar, the first son, Abdallah, said one legal scholar, and I did not hear him transmit anything from the Prophet. We learned from another scholar writing around 740 who observes, I never heard Jabir ibn Zaid say the Prophet said, and yet the young men around here are saying it 20 times an hour. So that would be a little bit of evidence towards the idea of fabrication. Whether these sources are even credible themselves is another matter. Now, we have here from Schacht, another scholar. He went beyond even Goldsire's arguments, concluding, for instance, that a great many traditions in the classical and other collections were put into circulation only after Shafi's time, the Islamic jurist who died in 820. The first considerable body of legal traditions from the Prophet originated towards the middle of the 2nd century. The evidence of legal traditions carries us back to about the year 100 AH only. Looking at some more. Let me just skip on here. Far from the legal system Sharia coming from Muhammad, it shows clear signs of being borrowed from the Jewish system. I'm going to give you some examples here. So we can see here a borrowing of words from the Jewish system that entered the Islamic Sharia system, and credit to Lloyd for this slide. Let's just wait for this next slide to come on. Okay, we're a bit frozen here. Okay, we are not getting anywhere. The slide is not going to change for us. Now, another problem. The Hadiths claim that Muhammad banned alcohol. Now, a mid-8th century, which would be contemporary account, suggests that this is a lie. A Chinese explorer called Du Wan says the followers of the Confession of Dashi, which is their way of referring to the Islam or something like Islam of that time, because we don't know if Islam had even begun at that stage. He says, when they drink alcohol, they behave in a ridiculous and undisciplined way during the whole day. Now, did they not get the memo? Why are Arabs going around absolutely drunk? They don't seem to be conscious of any hadith that said that Muhammad had banned alcohol. It is obvious that this teaching was concocted when the jurists needed to tackle the alcoholism in Arab lands by putting it into the mouth of Muhammad. But this could have been written in the 9th century, not the 7th century. Now, people like Goldheiser, what he found when he went to the Hadiths collections and looked at the work of the jurists, what he found is that as the laws in Sharia developed, Hadiths were created to basically put the teaching of a particular jurist into the mouth of Muhammad. So that you have backdating going on. Now, in addition, just want to, because we're doing a lot of rhetorical stuff, so I want to get into more solid evidence here. So we have here a coin from the 7th century. Now, you can notice here that Muhammad is mentioned on the coin, right? This here refers to Jesus, not the Muhammad of tradition, because you can see clearly that there are several crosses there. In the Hadiths, Muhammad would have said you have to destroy the crosses. It's very anti-cross, and yet we have this here. So that kind of undermines the claims of many of the Hadiths. And this is contemporary. You haven't used any sources from the 7th century. Here's another example of another coin with Muhammad on it with a cross. Supposedly Muhammad was against the cross. Here is another example, but this time Muhammad is mentioned in an inscription from 518 AD, 100 years before Muhammad, but it's not referring to a human prophet. It's actually referring to God. It's here, the translation, it's in Sabaik, clearly, by the Lord of Jews, by the highly praised. So this here in red is actually a reference to God. So you can see that in the 7th century, the Jews had copied the Jews and start putting Muhammad with a cross, in obviously reference to either God or Jesus. And then later, Islamic tradition decided to borrow that name and apply it to Muhammad. Here's the same inscription further. Now, one of the things, here's another example. Here's a fish, and Muhammad is on the coin, and this is from the mid 7th century. Obviously, we've said it quite a bit. I want to just cut past the rhetoric here and just give some 7th century and 6th century sources. Do you want to respond to any of that?
Actually, I want to respond to all of it. Can you move back to your first slide that you made in this argument? I'll go through each of these.
Right. So just so we're clear, I went through it pretty quick. So I'm going to give you about 30, 40 seconds for each one.
I don't think so, because
that's all I spent on each one.
Interruption. Look, let's be honest. I'll let you speak without interruption.
Go on ahead.
Please speak without interruption. Move to your first slide.
Because you can spend 10 minutes on each slide, but I was very quick going through them.
No, I think you did took a decent amount of time, and I think I should, if we are being fair, take a similar amount of time.
Which slide do you want?
Can you move back to your first slide, the first one you brought? Can you move back from this? Back. I think you spoke about this as well. Before this, before you spoke about Goldsire. So before. Okay, let's move to the next one. Okay, so I'll go through this slide by slide, and you can switch it when I finish one and tell you. So let's start with Goldsire. Firstly, again, this is about the credibility of Orientalists and Fred Donner. We have discussed all of that before, so I won't go into that, right? As far as this widespread fabrication is concerned, here's a simple refutation of this. Go look at Islamic Awareness. They reference Nabia Abbott explicitly. She's a Christian Orientalist scholar, right? She was, I think she's dead now. She basically said that the massive numbers are not massive numbers of traditions, matan, but massive number of isnads. Why? Because let's suppose there are each companion, 100 companions. Let me finish this point.
He's seen with written records here.
Let me finish my point, right? Let's suppose there's one companion. He narrates 10 hadiths to 10 students. Each 10 students narrate 10 hadiths to 10 students. Those narrate to 10 students each. This is how you can have one tradition and 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 number of isnads. This is how the massive number of isnads are there. So this doesn't refute hadith preservation. In fact, it's evidence of it. Because if Islamic records are preserved, we would have such an isnad system with so many isnads and so few traditions. And this is the case. Can you move to the next slide? Okay. I didn't
deal with this one, but anyway.
Okay, let me just address this nonsense regarding the evolution of Islamic narratives, right? Fred Donner made this argument in his book. I read it, I remember it. He basically said that Quran is some sources are praising earlier sources are just saying Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a normal human being, and the later sources are glorifying him. This is not the case. In fact, this is nonsensical. In the Quran, we have numerous ayat recording the authority of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and giving him high praise, right? The Medinan surahs and Meccan surahs as well. In Sahih Bukhari, which is 250 years later than the Quran.
Okay, we don't need your speech. Can you make a brief comment, please?
Mel,
Thanks.
this is a brief point. Let me finish this. Okay. In Sahih Bukhari, we have a tradition, the famous one, where Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said something about agriculture. It was incorrect. And then Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he's just human. If he's talking about Islam, he's speaking correctly. In these matters, he can be wrong. So we have a centuries later tradition that is basically doing the opposite of what Fred Donner says. So you can basically see that these claims are garbage. Can you move to the next slide, please? The previous one.
I didn't refer to this one.
As far as being highly plausible that Islamic sources are reliable, again, there is simply no evidence for or arguments against Islamic historical sources.
He's only describing what his
can you move to the next slide, please?
Historical scholars have said.
Move to the next one. I've addressed the point about fabrication. Let me address this narration, right? I've never, basically it's saying that one scholar was not narrating a lot of hadith, but other people were trying to narrate a lot of hadith at the same time. How does this refute hadith preservation? Some Sahaba did narrate a lot of hadith, like Hadith Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu. Some narrated very little. I think Khalid ibn Walid radiyallahu anhu.
I don't think you're getting the point.
Narration. So how is this an argument? Can you move to the next slide, please?
No, I think that you missed the point. He's basically hearing young fellas making stuff up. But anyway.
Where does he say that?
He's basically saying that there are people going around claiming that Jabir ibn Zayd said something, and he's saying that I never heard him saying it. Do you get it? In other words, they're claiming something that he personally never heard him say.
Yeah, so let's suppose I don't say something, someone else is saying that. Read this narration like this is not even an argument. Can you move to the next slide, please?
No, you're clearly not getting it. He's basically saying that there's fabrication going on. There are people claiming that so-and-so said something. And this person who knows him saying that he never heard him saying it. So I don't think you're getting it. Yeah.
Let's read what he said. Move back. Let's read what he said. We learned from... I spent a year sitting with Umar
the second one I think we're talking about.
Okay. We learn from another scholar writing around 740 who observes, I never heard Jabir bin said, say Prophet ﷺ said, meaning narrating hadith, and yet young men around here are saying it 20 times an hour. So if one person does not say something, that doesn't mean other people won't say it as well. Like, what's the argument here even? Can you move to the next slide?
Yeah, I don't think he got that, but anyway, I don't think he understood the implication of that. But anyway, let's move on. You've said your...
Okay, as for the point about great many... by the way, if you want more details regarding this rapid mutation claim, right? Basically, a lot of hadiths are made up soon. Watch my videos refuting arguments against hadith preservation. This is the 7th one there.
Yeah.
Secondly, I'll just link a reference for more detail. As for this part about great many traditions being post 820, this claim is nonsensical. Actually, it's pathetic how easily it's refuted. Musannaf Abu Razak.
He's a bigger expert than you, I'd say.
Well, let me finish my point. These claims regarding that Shaft and Goldsey are made are directly refuted. Why? We have Musannaf Ibn Abdul Razak. That's about 20 or 30,000 narrations. That is well before 820. He died in...
Quantity doesn't mean quality.
He died in year 811. So this claim is nonsensical. Mel, I didn't interrupt.
Do we have these works? Do we have these works?
Yeah, we have
these works.
Yes, we
from
have
his time.
Mel, I didn't interrupt you, right? I showed you that respect. I expect I would like the same respect from you. Don't interrupt me.
You were actually speaking for 5 times the amount of time it took me to go through these slides. You're talking 5 times. I know you expect me to just sit here and just listen to you.
Mel, okay. I was completely quiet during your time. Let's move to the next.
I only spent 5 minutes and you're spending about 25 minutes on the same few slides. This is not how it works. This is not how it works. Keep it brief.
Mel,
rhetoric is a lot, but you're not showing much evidence. You're just giving rhetoric, and this is not really useful.
Please move to the next slide.
I didn't do that one. So
can you move to the next one? You did this, the claim about plagiarism, right? Move to the previous one, previous one. You did this. Previous, 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 please. Yes, you did basically said that there are a lot of things borrowed by the Jewish law. Why? Because they are similar. Like just because things are similar in Islamic law and Jewish law, does that mean they were borrowed from there? What kind of logic is this? This is just assuming.
I'll show you why.
Similarity
Because
plagiarism. This is a
right,
nonsensical thing.
here's why. Here's why.
Move to that.
Where the Islamic scholars was just a short distance away from the Jewish academies. So it isn't just that there's a language similarity. They were next to each other, as you can see there on the map.
So, like Medina's, the Prophet Muhammad was in Mecca. Medina was this. Does this
mean? Sharia wasn't done in the 7th century down in Medina.
What? Jews were there. Like, what kind of logic is this? They are similar, therefore plagiarism. This is
where the Jewish academies were.
I mean, this is just a pathetic argument. Move to the next slide, please.
This might be news to you, but the Jewish academies were there.
Where?
Pompadita and Surah. This is where the Jews.
Quran was
the Exilarch was located.
Quran was
the Jewish. Sorry, I'm just trying to speak there. The Jewish Exilarch was located there, and the Jewish academies were located there. They weren't located down in Medina or Mecca.
For your argument to work, they have to be in Mecca and Medina because these are Hadith, and the Quran goes back to Mecca and Medina. So
we're not talking about the Quran. We're talking about Sharia. This is where the Sharia was developed. Unless you're completely ahistorical.
It was in Mecca. Look at the work of Yasin. Look at the work of Harold Motsky. Motsky has a book, Origins of Islamic Law in Mecca. A lot of my arguments were taken from that book. Go read it. The arguments you are presenting are even refuted by Western scholars. Move to the next slide, please. Okay. So what's the logic of the argument here?
The logic is that the story. Are you asking, or is that a rhetorical question, or are you actually asking me?
Rhetorical question.
It's what?
It was a rhetorical question.
Okay.
Firstly, this is saying while Hadith say Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam banned alcohol, a mid-8th century contemporary report suggests that this is a lie. Okay, he said this is contemporary. This is false. Why? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was alive in early 7th century. This is mid-8th century. No. This is not even contemporary.
Do you not understand what I've just said? What this is saying?
I did understand it. Like this is a false claim. This is the first claim among many here.
Well, hold on.
What does contemporary mean? Do you know what it means?
Right. Listen. Right. Let's just imagine that your story that I don't believe in. Your story that there was a guy called Muhammad and he taught all of these things. He said, "Don't drink alcohol." Just listen.
Mel, I let you speak.
Yeah, but you're not letting me finish the point. I'm to make you asked me
the point, Mel.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you now to just to listen because you clearly don't understand the point, and I do need to explain it. Okay. So the point is, your story is that there was a guy called Muhammad, right? He lived in the 7th century. He taught his followers supposedly that alcohol is not to be drunk, right? That all happened in the 7th century. So 110 years later, in the very lands where Muslims are supposedly are, such as in Iraq, this guy went all around the Middle East. He was from China originally. And he's talking, when he talks about the confession of the Dashi, he's talking about the Arabs and their beliefs and so forth. Okay. He's not reporting anything about the idea that alcohol was banned. He's actually saying not only do they drink alcohol, but they're absolutely alcoholics. They're just rolling around drunk. And this is not a unique piece of evidence. Like I could also show you evidence of in the early...
Firstly,
in the a caliph sending a wine cup to the Chinese court in 717 as well, which
Well,
again contradicts the Hadiths.
and then
Now, if you ask me, if you just let me finish the point,
my turn to speak.
you
Or
ask. If you,
look,
okay, I'm just going to. If you're not going to be quiet, I'm going to put you out. Okay, so be quiet because I am the host of the channel. Thank you. So the point is, if what you're saying was true, if everything is all hunky-dory and historically reliable, okay, you would not find caliphs sending wine cups to the Chinese in the early 8th century, and you would not find widespread alcoholism if what you're saying is true. There is no awareness of any ban on alcohol in the 8th century. So all of the hadiths are basically nonsense that were written in the 9th, 10th, and 11th century. There's no evidence that any of these were written in the time that you said. If they were written, then you'd find contemporary evidence, but we don't find it. We find the opposite.
Mel, can
okay,
I
back to you.
Now?
Yes, you can.
Firstly, this entire argument is actually nonsensical for a very simple reason. The assumption is just because something is banned, everyone throughout the Muslim giant would have stopped drinking. This doesn't happen, and there's a very simple reason.
Because it didn't happen.
Well, let me respond to this point. In America, there was prohibition, right? Did people stop drinking alcohol? No, they still drank it. Like, the logic of this argument is nonsensical.
So Muslims aren't following Muhammad? Is that what you're saying?
Some people are good, some people are not so good. Like, this happens everywhere. Can you move to the next slide, please?
What about the caliphs? Are you telling me the caliphs knew what Muhammad taught and went totally against him?
Some caliphs were pious, like the rightly guided caliphs, Sayyidina Muawiyah Radiallahu Anhu, Sayyidina Umar ibn Abdul Aziz Radiallahu Anhu, but we don't believe that every caliph was pious. Of course not. This is a nonsensical claim. Can you move to the next?
How come? Can you give me any evidence of banning of alcohol in the 7th century?
Well, we have. It's mentioned in the Quran, like literally, banning of alcohol is mentioned in the Quran.
That's not from the 7th century. You don't seriously believe it's from the 7th century.
Everyone agrees.
How come the caliphs and these everyday Muslims don't seem to have any notion of this? I know you would say, well, oh, it's just these are the bad ones. He's basically saying he's traveled all around the lands. He's traveled all around the lands. What he's
addictive.
He's fallen. He's traveling all around. You've said the point. He's he's going across all the lands, and and this is commonplace. He's discovering that everywhere he goes, the people they're just making a show of themselves. This is not just a random person that's drinking alcohol. He's actually so horrified. This is the thing he wants to speak about them.
No. Well, I'll just give a very simple example in response. During prohibition, alcohol was banned.
It's not like for like, though, is it?
People were drinking it. This claim is that stupid. Can you move to the next slide now, please?
So you're saying Muhammad is just the same as the American government? Ah, come on now. Seriously.
Wow, like this level of desperation is truly impressive. Can you move to the next slide? Yeah, again, I think one of the arguments made here, one of the points has Muhammad written on it and a cross drawn on it. So what? Like, what does that prove? Christians could have made it, or it could have been an earlier coin in use in the Christian reign, but when Muslims took over, they wrote Muhammad on it. What does this prove? Can you move to the next slide?
Well, no, you've asked me a question. What does it prove? Well, it proves. So what it
was a question. Can you move to the next slide? Why?
Because you've asked a question, I'm going to respond.
I asked a rhetorical question.
Well, I do. What it does prove is the fact that the story. These people were supposed to be. Okay, I'm going to have to put you in silence here if you're going to talk over me. These people here were clearly not Muslim at a time they were supposed to be Muslim. That's the point.
I don't think this claim makes any sense. And
well, the Hadith say that the people.
I'm not wasting time on this. Can you move to the next slide?
No, sorry. The people are claiming you and other Muslims are claiming that the people were converted to Islam. The coins say a different story. These people were still Christian. They were using coins with crosses on. And this Muhammad here is not referring to the Muhammad that you claim to be alive. It's actually as we saw in the next slide, it's actually a reference to God. It's got nothing to do with Muhammad the Prophet.
Can you move to the next slide? Again, the same. Skip this one. I'll address all of these together.
Another Christian coin with Muhammad on it. Yeah.
Move to the next one. This again, this has the name of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam written in a Jewish context a century before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. Unless you are assuming there is only one person named Muhammad, that would be a very simple response to this nonsense.
This is not referring to a person. This is referring to God.
No, it's not. I've read this reference actually, and I'll try to this very
Lord
soon.
of Jews, by the highly praised. This is a reference to God. This is a prayer to God.
Just
I know. Don't go down the road of having to lie here.
The next, we move to the next.
So, what do you make of this? What's your response to this?
Well, I would like to respond when I'm not being interrupted, but it seems every time I speak, I am interrupted.
Go on, respond.
No, I'm not wasting my time right now. Move to the next slide, please. Next one. I think it's pretty much over, right? Yeah, this is just nonsensical claim, waste of time. Now, can we move to our closing statements? Because to be honest, I'm done with the debate. Should I go first? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, you go first. Go on ahead.
Okay, please let me speak without being interrupted.
How much time are we talking?
Give me 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes, yeah.
2 minutes without interruption. Okay, so I hope you have all seen in this debate that the preservation and reliability of Islamic historical records is proven beyond any reasonable doubt. And the argument against it are actually quite pathetic, to be honest. And like, seriously, look at this example of fish is drawn with Muhammad, therefore like some revisionist nonsense is true. What kind of arguments are these? I have actually really enjoyed this debate. I was really looking forward to a debate on Hadith preservation, because I challenged Christians and Orientalists for a long time, and no one was willing to debate. So yeah, I'm happy I did this debate, and I'm actually really happy with my work. Thanks to Mel for hosting this debate on our channel. Inshallah, I'll be uploading it on my channel as well. That's it. That's my closing statement.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. I really enjoyed the debate, despite the fact that we're banging heads and all that. Yeah. So, just in summary, the only argument that I heard from you that actually was that I found even remotely compelling was the one to do with the stories of the battles and the logistics. I think that argument I found compelling. I didn't find the Isnad argument at all compelling for the reasons given that it's a claim that people orally pass stories on down through the generation, but you have nothing apart from the person at the end of the line claiming it. I didn't find that, no matter how much you try to say it did. I didn't hear any evidence from the 7th century, any contemporary evidence. So I was surprised, actually. I thought I would hear something on the lines of that. You did seem to make some suggestions of some documents of hadiths that are earlier than what I found, but obviously we'd need to cross-check those to see how far back we can actually go. But overall, what else? There's been a lot. I didn't think your argument of dissimilarity was generally works, because of the fact that people who are aware of that argument and they're trying to forge a story would naturally put in imperfections in people's character to make it more authentic sounding. So that's where I would. In terms of whether the hadiths are historically reliable or the Sirah, I think I've shown evidence that the hadiths were predominantly used to buttress laws that the Sharia were creating. So there goes the hadiths for you. And we saw at the very beginning that you referred to Sunni hadiths. The fact that there are Shia hadiths that you disagree with undermines the case that, you know, these hadiths are reliable, because you can't even agree about which hadiths are reliable. There was an awful lot more evidence that I had. In fact, I only managed to give about 5% evidence. Fortunately, we got bogged down in sort of rhetorical stuff that wasn't really, I didn't find very helpful. So anyway, that's my bit. Any last words?
No. Just I want to say that can we end the stream now so you can give me the video? I'll upload it on my channel as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, all the best.